Engage with the stories of our time. Discover worlds that excite your imagination. Venture where few have gone before. Introducing the PBS Documentaries channel. A vast catalog of thought-provoking programs, all in one place. Stream on demand and enjoy the extraordinary storytelling of Ken Burns. Experience the epic saga of history and the richness of art and culture. Know your world through fearless investigative journalism. Explore the furthest reaches of science and the breathtaking beauty of the wild.
Are you seeing this?
PBS is America's home for documentaries. Acclaimed, award-winning programs, now available on demand.
Wow, how about that?
Real human drama meets the power of story. Yes. PBS Documentaries. Start your free trial today at Amazon Prime Video channels.
Hello, I'm Tabitha Jackson, and I'm the director of the Sundance Film Festival. It is an absolute honor to be here as part of this extraordinary talkback. The subject matter couldn't be more vital and timely. The participants of this talkback could not be more articulate creatively through each of their works. And it is really a pleasure that I get to be here. There is a connection that we have through Sundance. Stanley Nelson, an incredible body of work. I'm just going to read, for each of these people, I'm going to read the first line of their biography, because we could be here for hours if I were to try and do justice to what they've done. The first line of Stanley's biography is, Stanley Nelson is today's leading documentarian of the African-American experience, which sums it up perfectly. And he also directed Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution, which was a film made in 2015, but feels like it was made yesterday. Shaka King, the first line of Shaka's biography, and he's being very coy off camera. Shaka is an emergent auteur filmmaker with a body of work that spans the film and television arenas. I would say that the word emergent is now redundant, but he is the director, co-writer, and producer behind Judas and the Black Messiah. And these two texts, as it were, Black Panthers and Judas and the Black Messiah, will speak to each other. Shaka has also just disappeared from my screen, so I'm confident that he is going to rejoin us as soon as he figures out his tech. We are also incredibly lucky to have with us tonight Lumumba Akinwole-Bandele. And the first line of Lumumba's bio is that he is a father, husband, longtime community organizer and educator from central Brooklyn. And we will hear a lot more about his work later and the perspective that he brings to what we have just seen. And finally, this incredible anchor to this conversation that we're about to have, Ericka Huggins. Ericka's first line is, Ericka Huggins is an educator, leading Black Panther Party member, former political prisoner, human rights advocate, and poet. That is a business card that I would kill for. So welcome, everybody. Shaka, you will let us know. Yes.
I'm having the craziest time. I'm sorry.
That was amazing. Are you all right? Have you got
I was trying to, I couldn't get, sorry about that. My apologies.
That is no problem at all. We were just doing the intros. As I said, we've got these two amazing texts, which are both born of the subject matter, which is the Black Panther Party and the civil rights movement of which they were and continue to be their legacy a part of. So I wanted just to ask each of you, and I'll start with Ericka, who was part of the Black Panther Party. How are you thinking about them and what they did on this day, March the 12th, 2021? What are you left with?
The Black Panther Party, the civil rights movement, its connection to the project of American chattel slavery. I think about it all of the time. I was remembering today standing at the Smithsonian Museum for African American History and Culture, and standing in front of the Angola prison cell in the museum and reading the plaque that said that it was a plantation and that it was named Little Angola because so many African slaves were held there. It is now Attica. It is now Angola, one of the most notorious places that a human being would be forced to live.
Mm.
I stood there a long time. I believe that everything in history is connected, although historians separate and silo history. It's not like that. And so the feeling that I'm left with for all of the movements is how touched I am that there are still people who are willing to step forward, step out and speak. It's really remarkable understanding the threat that I personally was under and the threat that, for instance, the people in the Black Lives Matter networks are under. It's the same kind of surveillance.
Mm.
And the films that bring us together today are extraordinary.
Mm.
Both directors courageous enough to tell the truth or allow others to tell the truth. And I feel like finally, after many, many decades and much sorrow, I am seeing a part of my life on screen, in books, and in films to come. My only hope is that at some point there will be a young woman of color who takes on one of these films about these movements, and that women are situated in them in the way that they do deserve.
Ericka, thank you so much. And we will move to the filmmakers after we've heard from Lumumba, because Lumumba, I wonder if you could articulate through the work that you do, perhaps that perspective, what the Black Panther Party have and their work has left you with today.
You know, it's a legacy, and I think both films actually capture what the legacy of the Panther Party actually is, which is a call to action. It's a call to arms. It is for us not to sit with the emotions that these storytellers so powerfully conveyed, but for us to be inspired to move. You know, many of the Panthers that are talked about in Stanley's film, you know, are still around, right? Many of them are still here, although far too many of them are suffering in prison because of their political work. You know, as we speak right now, Sundiata Acoli, Mumia Abu-Jamal, Russell Maroon Schultz, Jamil Al-Amin, only a few that are in prison right now fighting for their lives, not only to stay healthy and be able to live outside of prison, but because of they're dealing with significant health concerns. And so essentially these films and the storytelling of this very important and powerful part of our history is a call to action. And I want to make sure people don't just sit comfortably with those emotions and with that inspiration, but actually get involved in the work to free these political prisoners, get involved in the work to defend our lives from police attacks, police violence, get involved in the work to develop holistically healthy, self-determined, self-contained communities, and make sure that we are reflecting the better part of our generations long legacy of fighting for freedom.
That's so powerful. So let's move to Stanley first. And Lumumba, you're allowed to call them both movies. That's okay. Stanley, so I mean, that question about what we are left with also I could reframe as what prompted you in the first place. And I don't know whether that was 2015 or whether you'd been thinking about it for years before, but what was the kind of animating impulse for you to decide that you wanted to make a non-fiction film about the Black Panther Party?
Yeah, I think that I had wanted to make the film for a long time. You know, that I was 15 or so in 1966 when the Panther Party started. I was in New York. I was the target audience of the Panthers, you know, a young Black man living in the city, you know. And so the Panthers, so the Black Panthers were heroes to us, you know, everybody, you know, that I knew. And I, as time passed, that story wasn't being told, you know, that the story of, it was a very different story about the Black Panthers. So I wanted to try to tell the story that I knew. I think that it became time in my career that I could tell the story. You know, we forget that even 5-6 years ago, the landscape was very different. You know, it hadn't been kind of the Netflixing of the world, you know, and Hulu and all those different things. You know, today you could, I mean, I could walk into Netflix and say, Black Panthers. They go, well, yeah, you know, everybody would go over the moon. Though, you know, 6-7 years ago, you said the Black Panthers, it was like, oh no, oh geez, no. So, you know, I felt that I could make the film and that it was an evergreen film. But little did I know when, you know, we were about 3/4 through with editing, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement started. And, you know, I remember somebody put it on TV in the edit room. We were just like, oh my God, you know, it's the same thing all over again. You know, the Panthers started because of police brutality. You know, Black Lives Matter in 2015-16 was about police brutality. The protests this summer were about police brutality and so many other things. We end the film, you know, with the 10-point program, and different Panthers read the 10-point program as we fade it out because, you know, all 10 of those things we still need. I'm encouraged that, you know, young people especially are fighting for it and understanding that we need it. But we got to keep, you know, we got to keep pushing, because every time, you know, Black people, you know, so much in this country want things to be okay. You know, we just want to rest. You know, we want, okay, we got a Black president. All right, now we can rest. You know, whatever. But we can't rest.
So did you, to follow up, did you see it as a filmmaker, did you see it as a call to action or a raising awareness of, as you say, it's the same thing all over again? Or did you simply need to tell this story in a way that you felt people hadn't heard it before?
I think both. I mean, you know, we want the film to be a call to action, but we don't want to say, you know, and call 847-377-2121 to join up. You know, we can't do that. But what we want to do is to, if you can make the connections, you know, so that some critic, you know, said something about the film that oh, well, he never talks about Black Lives Matter, and we were all just like, you know, is this guy crazy? I mean, you don't understand that that's what we're saying, you know, then you haven't watched the film.
Right. Thank you for that. So then moving over to you, Shaka, the same question really, what was the animating impulse?
It was the opportunity to put this forth in a piece of pop culture. And the way it came to me, when the Lucas brothers pitched it to me the way they did, I, you know, as somebody who believes that all art is ultimately propaganda. And so when I think about the things I want to make, I think at this point about whether they have utility. And it was, okay, we can tell this story and get this information, get these ideas and these ideologies in, you know, a piece of entertainment. And so for me, it was the opportunity to do that. That was the the initial draw for me.
That's really interesting. And were you aware of had you seen Stanley's film?
Yeah, I'd seen Stanley's film when it first came out, and I knew, I'd say, just growing up in the household I had a sort of cursory level understanding of the Black Panthers, but it wasn't until I started researching the film that I gained, I'd say, another perspective. Which flow into your other question. When you talk about the purpose of the film, for me, I always think of, especially a film like ours, which is narrative fiction, even though it's based on a true story, is it's just a beginning. It's a way in. It's just a way in, so that people watch this and they say, wait, this really happened, and then they go and they learn about the details, and then that leads to, oh, wait, this wasn't a national organization? Well, who were some of the other people who were doing this work? And then hopefully the most gratifying thing is when, people hit me up and they say, I watched the movie and then I did a deep dive and I was up all night. Those are things that lets me know it worked in that way.
I'm really interested in what an individual filmmaker or an individual filmmaking team brings to the exploration of the work, and in part this may also be about fiction and non-fiction. And I watched the two films again today, kind of back to back, and they just speak to each other beautifully, and that each has different dimensions. But Shaka, what did fiction allow you to do? And was there a kind of creative license taken with things that you knew, things that you imagined? What liberty did you have, given that these were real people, some of whom are still alive? It's the historical record is vital, but what did you bring to it creatively?
Well, what fiction allows you to do is, you're talking about people that are viewed as icons. And so when you look at icons, it's very hard to really understand the human sacrifice involved. One of the crazy things is, I'm almost positive that this is from your film, Stanley, and it features you, Ericka, where you talk about having a child and having a child within, the movement when things were as, dangerous and as tight as they were, and how you thought about that. And that was something you had to consider. And it was hearing that led to the scene that we have in the movie where Deborah is talking. It led to not even just that scene, it led to that entire storyline. And I remember presenting that to Akua Nigeri after we, written it, because we did all of that without having spoken to her. It wasn't, she didn't really get a hold of that material, until after it was already written, which, by the way, is probably crazy for her, because she's like, wait, I've lived this person has my name on this page, who isn't me. You haven't spoken to me about what my experience was in going through this. You're making a lot of assumptions, which we did, which we're doing in dramatizing. So it's very, to answer your question, is complex when you start looking at, real people's lives and dramatizing real people's lives. And, I think I'm glad that, and it's a tricky thing because, we couldn't have gotten the movie made, most likely, if we just came to them and said, hey, we want to make a movie. We had to show them something, and then invite them into the process of reshaping that material, which is what, we did. But it's just very complex, because, I think about, this was something that, after we finished the film, one of the folks that we started talking to a lot was Blair Anderson, who was, present during the assassination, was wounded during the assassination. And he talked about, we showed him a cut of the film early, and he talked about what the viewing experience would be like for people who lived through this, and how we needed to take that into account when we, you know, were putting together, when we were releasing it. And so it was like, what can we do in advance of the movie coming out to let people know that this is going to happen? This is a way to watch it and have a supported viewing experience. It was something that really he really designed, quite frankly, that we had to work with him and to support in designing. But there's all these things that you don't think about when you're, you know, when you don't take the step of dramatizing a real life story. And you come away from it, you know, with seeing some benefits. You know, I think on a holistic level for the world, it's good for this to exist, but there's collateral damage in terms of just people's emotions who've already been traumatized, having to be re-traumatized, having issues with liberties you took that you might think are innocuous that aren't innocuous whatsoever to them. You know, it's complicated. It's very complicated.
Mm. Yeah, and Stanley, and then there's a great question that I'm saying I'm going to ask Ericka shortly, but Stanley, I wanted to come to you because it's noticing, you know, these things that become historical records and archival sources become sources of truth, and your film and your films actually have done and will continue to do that. But both you and Shaka, the archival footage of William O'Neill talking in the documentary Eyes on the Prize 2, that is both the open and close of Judas and the Black Messiah, and is, you know, a key moment as we come to see your film. I just wonder how you think about creatively how you can, again, add to the historical record, how you use your imagination when what you have is archival footage shot for particular reasons, you know, the testimony of people, all who are coming from their own particular perspectives. How do you make a sense of that? And what is the burden of feeling that your film is going to be the source of truth about the Black Panther Party, if that made any sense?
Yeah, it made a lot of sense. I think one of the things is that, you know, frankly, Ericka saved us. You know, when we did the interview, she said it was like the elephant. You know, I mean, she just came up with that. She said, you know, the Black Panther Party is like the story of the blind man and the elephant. You know, one person feels the trunk and says it's a spear. You know, another, you know, and you know, whatever. And it was just an incredible story. And she said, I say she saved us because we then, it starts the film. It's the very first thing you see in the film and hear in the film. And we took that so that we don't have to, you know, that people are going to disagree, you know, and people are going to tell their separate Panther stories and know their separate Panther stories. And the Black Panthers were one thing to one person and another thing to another. They were certainly one thing in Chicago and another thing in LA and another thing in New York. So that in a way, you know, it not only freed us in the film, Ericka saying that, but it also freed our minds, because it was like, okay, we don't have to tell the one Black Panther story. We have to tell one of the stories. And, you know, certainly there will be other films that are about, you know, different parts of the Panther story. I also just wanted to say, because we were talking about, Lumumba mentioned, you know, somebody, I think actually it was Ericka, mentioned the women's story. One of the great things that we, you know, have a kind of a section where we talk about women in the Black Panther Party, although we talk about them throughout the film. And the producer of the film, Lorenz Grant, you know, is an African-American woman. And, you know, and the editor and I, you know, both Black men, you know, were trying to get the film cut down. And we kind of chopped the women's section down, you know, and Lorenz came in one day and said, well, what happened to the women? You know, that was the best part of the film, you know. You can't, and you know, and we put it back, and you know, people call us out every time, every screening we've ever had, you know, that they love the fact that you know, we talk specifically about women in the party. And you know, that just, you know, it proves so many things, but you know, it really proves that, you know, why you diversify your crew, why you have different people who are coming from different angles around you, so that you don't see everything from one point of view.
Absolutely. And also, like, what a good producer does is to notice those gaps too. And Shaka, it's funny you say that, Stanley, because I was noticing in Judas and the Black Messiah, that scene which is done with such economy, where Hampton calls out William O'Neill early on and says, what do the Panthers have to say about how to treat the sisters? And it was, for me, it was so powerful and economical, having seen Stanley's film and understanding the import of that it is there in your film. It feels like a character revelation, but it's also clearly there was a thesis around this, and it was important to uphold it. So Ericka, the question that's come in from the audience somewhat relates to this or can trampoline from it. A question from AK, question from Ms. Huggins. What aspects of the Panthers do you still feel are unexplored? What are people still unaware of and need to learn? You're still on mute, Ericka.
Thank you. There are a number of things, Tabitha, and one of them is how much we love the people we were serving. I mean, you saw it in Vanguard. You saw Fred living his life, love in action. And that's what we were about. Another thing is that people don't know that there were more women in the Black Panther Party than men. And there are also women who are still incarcerated and or exiled who are party members. Rarely a mention. I don't mean today, I mean over time.
Yeah.
And we live in a society that does not put women first. And yet we were the community survival programs of the Black Panther Party. There were 65 community survival programs. And usually the stories stop at around 1974, 75, something like that, even 73. However, we developed people's free medical clinics. Why? Because of medical discrimination in our communities. And they spread like wildfire across the country. They were everywhere. We had chapters everywhere, including in Africa, Brazil, and in Europe, and India. And I want to say that there's a whole huge chunk of the history of the Black Panther Party that hasn't been touched yet. We know about the Breakfast for Children program that so embarrassed the federal government that they created the National Free Breakfast and Lunch program. We know about Police Watch, as we call it now, that is Huey and Bobby and Little Bobby and others contesting the arrests of people to the police, asking them if they knew the law, and in many instances they don't. However, we don't know about the schools we created. The free coat and boot program created in New York City for the winter. How did we know to do this? Because we went to people and we asked them, what do you need? What are your needs? And we were a clearinghouse for the needs of people. And our motto was serve the people, body and soul. And there was so much love in our hearts. And I think that the other thing that I want to say this with all compassion for everybody, but we still have not unpacked what the FBI's counterintelligence program did to harm, to suck the life out of party members and their families, to arrest, to abuse and murder, assassinate members of the Black Panther Party. And as I watched both films over time and watched Judas and the Black Messiah more recently, I was so amazed, and I can't say I was happy, but because it was poignant for me to see William O'Neill not as a snitch, but as a human being who the FBI's counterintelligence program groomed and manipulated. And he committed suicide.
Mm.
That isn't what we wanted for him. I met many of the informants in the Black Panther Party. They would tell me when they were on their way out that they were told lies about us and then they had to leave. Those were the few that I met. But at one point in Los Angeles and also in Connecticut, anywhere that we were, in Oakland, in Los Angeles, I believe there were 1 out of every 4 party members was working for the government, for the FBI and or local law enforcement.
Mm.
And one of the reasons that I was arrested and held in solitary confinement and separated from my baby daughter, she was 3 months old at that time, and I was grieving the loss of John Huggins, my husband, who'd been assassinated 2 months before that on the UCLA campus, orchestrated by the FBI.
Mm.
My arrest and the arrest of Bobby Seale, who I was on trial with, orchestrated by the FBI. And quite often, Black people were used to disguise what the government was doing.
Mm.
So there are so many things that can still be explored. And Stanley and I would have long conversations about his film being the first, one of the first to actually go in and attempt to tell the truth in many different ways. And I thought that was great.
Mm.
There is so much more imagination and creativity to pull it all out, because one of the pieces Lumumba mentioned, legacy. One of the pieces of legacy is those survival programs. I meet people who tell me they got through school because their mama sent them to the breakfast program in San Francisco, in New Orleans, wherever it was. And that I met a young man whose parents, one had the trait for sickle cell and the other had the disease. And when he was born with the disease, his mother was able to advocate for him with doctors in hospitals because the Black Panther Party had educated her about sickle cell anemia.
Mm.
Doctors weren't aware. So you see, there's a legacy that involves women and men and all of our other coinciding identities, right?
Yeah.
We weren't these flat beings. We were full, and our lives were rich before we joined the Black Panther Party, but that just made everything blossom for us. And we didn't get a paycheck.
Mm. Mm.
It was unheard of. And we worked and worked and worked, and we were median age 19 years old.
Well, this is a perfect. It's so amazing to be able to listen to you, Ericka. And before Lumumba, I come to you. I want to ask you, Ericka, a question that just came in. This is an important one and relates to the 19-year-old comment you just made. Question from Mayan, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that, Mayan. I am 10 years old and I'm doing a project on the Black Panther Party. How were children involved, or did they help with the party? And did any children of the Black Panther Party write stories about what it was like to be a child of a Black Panther member? Can you answer that for us?
Yes, there are people. First of all, Mayan, hello. And I wish I could see your beautiful face. I'm so touched that you've asked this great question. And children were involved everywhere. I ran the Oakland Community School, which was the creative idea of the Black Panther Party, an elementary school in Oakland, California, in East Oakland, which is primarily Black and brown. And I could tell you all about it, but you can research it yourself. You just put in Oakland Community School and you'll pull up all kinds of beautiful things. One of the things is that those children wrote to incarcerated people, like the San Quentin Six. They had friends everywhere. they sometimes went out with us to rallies and to events. But more than anything, they had this school where they could learn about the true history of our society, not in any slanted way, just the truth. And their public school and private school peers, age peers, were not being given that. So, for instance, at that school, Tabitha and everyone, Mayan, we had unborn babies on the waiting list for that school. It was remarkable. And people like Maya Angelou and James Baldwin and Sun Ra. I don't know if anybody remembers Sun Ra. You do, Lumumba? And Cesar Chavez and Richard Pryor, Don Cornelius. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on and on. Who Rosa Parks visited. That was a day. And they didn't come because we outreached them, please come and visit our school. They wanted to see this place where children of color, particularly Black children, were being loved exactly as they are. And so those children continued, Mayan, to make a difference in their world. They went on, and some of them have become great leaders. And one of them is an actress, Kalita Smith. She's a comedic actress. She was definitely a wonderful child in that school. And I'll tell you what she said, and then I'll be quiet. When I asked her, because I wrote a master's thesis in sociology, using the school as an antidote to race and gendered education. When I asked her what was it that she loved about Oakland Community School, she said, "That's a crazy question, Ericka. If I walked in having had a rough day before I got to school, somebody would just come from, I don't know where they came from, and say, Cleta, can I give you a hug? If I came in with my braids looking all fuzzy, with, crazy, because my mother was trying to put herself through college and raise 2 children, somebody would walk up to me with a comb and say, come on, honey, let me rebraid your hair. And when I wasn't feeling so good, there would be somebody who would lift me up. And when she told me that, I realized that that is the experience of a school that really serves young people. And we didn't have it. That's how we came to what we needed to do. So I'm trying to give you examples about this broader legacy that is often not missed, but only the surface has been scratched so far.
Ericka, that's amazing. And Lumumba, I want to come to you. It's extraordinary. I find it extraordinary that out of such injustice, trauma, tragedy, perpetrated by the state and others, that what Ericka is just expressing so powerfully is love. The not flip side of it, but this also has such a powerful, both the storytelling of that time and the Black Panther Party itself clearly has a powerful political transformative possibility. And I wonder if you would just reflect a little on what we can do with these stories, what these stories add up to in terms of a bigger narrative which has not been expressed, and this constant battle in which narrative is such an essential tool.
Yeah, I think that we're going to probably continue, and I think it's a good thing to ride this legacy conversation, because that's essentially what we are able to do. There's different pieces of the Panthers' ideologies, contributions, and just overall work that we can tap onto and build out of. So I and a number of other organizers out of Central Brooklyn created our Central Brooklyn Cop Watch in 1999, essentially after the Panther Party. And we understood that it was one thing to hear what that was about, and it's another thing to put it in action, right? And so the ideas that came out of that are so powerful. I also come out of a Black Freedom School out of Central Brooklyn called Uhuru Sasa Shule. It was the first contemporary Black independent school in Brooklyn that was non-religious, but we also had Panthers that taught there. You know, we had Panthers that sent their children there. That was the legacy, the idea that we knew that we had to recognize both the responsibility to address our issues and understand we had the ability to do it, right? And so those two things combined helped us understand that ain't nothing stopping us but us. And so whether we applied that to education, whether we applied that to healthcare, whether we applied that to housing, whether we applied that to all those different human needs that we have, that's it. Like, we have to do that while simultaneously holding the state to account for the promises that they have not kept. The fact that we have to have legislation drafted so that we could have access to vote speaks volumes, right? The fact that we have to be demonstrating and protesting for decades to have quality education speaks volumes. The fact that we have centuries of never having a moment where law enforcement actually served and protected us speaks volumes. So we understand that those messages resonate. What is a functioning affirmation today that essentially comes from the Panther Party is this idea of reimagining safety and saying that we keep us safe. That when we talk about what Black safety looks like, Black communities, we keep us safe. Recognizing that we don't rely on the police for that. We rely on each other, making sure that we have all that we need to survive. We keep us safe. Those are some of the legacies that the Panthers taught us. And recognizing also that the Panthers learned that from others. So it wasn't started there, but we are a part of a long continuum of people who are continuously moving this forward, of pushing forward for our total and full liberation.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. And I want to carry on this because, again, just the power of narrative, both for good and for harm, is what you, as all of you in your different capacities, and particularly these two filmmakers, are responsible for. And so there's a question for you, Shaka, from Leslie, which can you discuss how you were able to balance so many moving parts of the story? COINTELPRO, Fred Hampton, Rainbow Coalition, William O'Neill. How you decide to tell a story is kind of what we are left with and what is added to the bigger narrative. And these stories, Judas the Black Messiah and Vanguard, are, as we were saying before, now kind of in the fabric of the culture. So both from a kind of creative and historical point of view, how did you shape all those parts? How did you know what to pull out, Shaka, and include in your work?
I started with putting in everything on that we knew. And it was just, a script that you couldn't get under 200 pages, which was no way we were going to get that financed and produced and shot. So it started from there, and then it was just sort of thinking about the things we wanted to say and highlight, and prioritizing those and making the difficult decision of losing the other threads that we discovered that we thought were important, but that we would just hope that, the viewer would, the audience after the movie would go and start to fill in some of those blanks on their own.
And I'm really interested to see, Judas and the Black Messiah. We were lucky enough to you trusted us to show it at Sundance this year, and it's just beginning its life. It's in awards consideration, and it means a particular thing in this moment because of the landscape into which it is being received. We as an audience make meaning of it. And Stanley, your film Vanguard is over 5th anniversary, I guess, of its release. And when I see, I'm trying to get at how you think about meaning making, because the film meant one thing when it was in your head being conceived, and perhaps it meant another thing when it met its first audience then. And then when I watch it today and see the scene in the Capitol in Sacramento with people going in there with guns and what an uproar that caused and how kind of seismic that was, I just wonder how you think about the film now. The value of it is clear. That's why we should be watching it over and over again. It means a different thing every time you watch it. But how do you think about this film and the body of your work and what it means?
I think that as you say, the meanings of the films always change, and especially the Panthers, in light of everything that happened this summer and in light of where this country is. I have twins who are 21, and in the summer after George Floyd was I think they're so young, but they're now 21, and when George Floyd was killed, we had just decided that we were going to get out of New York, and go up to Cape Cod and be ensconced there. And 2 days later, George Floyd was killed, and the protest erupted. And they said, and it's the middle of COVID, and they said, they got to go. We have to go back to New York because we got to protest. Mm-hmm. And we were like, you were begging to get out of the city, and now we're up here. No, it's crazy. And they were like, well, we're 21, we're going. And that's the first time they ever said that, and my wife and I said, okay, finally we drove them back to New York, and we stayed for a week, and we left, and they just kept on protesting. And I was really, really just so proud of them after I was pissed because I had to drive back and forth, but I was so proud, that's what they did. And I think, so in light of that, the Panthers and the movement of the Panthers is a very different thing. I think also, the 10-point program is a very different thing. I think that so much has changed for African Americans, that we are realizing that 75 million people voted for Trump, right? And that we have to do it on our own. And that's what the Panthers were saying, that we've got to make our own way. And I think that more and more we're understanding that. And what Lumumba said was brilliant. That doesn't mean that we have to push for legislation, but we also have to build on our own. And that's what the Panthers were really about.
Yeah, and Stanley, I was also thinking about how film can act as a kind of time machine, and you, in the people that you have interviewed, across your body of work, but in this one too, we have them now, but we're at a moment where there was a discussion earlier, and I just wondered if you'd reflect on what is being lost as well as what is being documented, and the importance of that.
Yeah, I mean, so many people that we interviewed have been lost. Ericka just told me that Gil Parker had passed. I didn't know that. Who's in the film in the shootout in LA. The two guys who were trapped in the building, and that's probably my favorite scene in the film. They both passed away, soon after the film was made. So many people are going. But I also want to say, as a filmmaker, I mean, it was almost like, I could, to be able to talk to Ericka, to sit down and talk to Ericka, and become friends, Kathleen Cleaver, so many people that, and so many of what was called the rank and file, or the lumpen proletariat, the worker bees, just to talk to them and kind of be in their presence, was so amazing, for me. When I was 15, again, when the Panthers started, at one point, I went to school on 110th Street in Manhattan, and me and my friend walked over to the Panther office, and we were gonna kind of join up, and we stood across the street, and we were like, no, no, no. Because it wasn't like you could be a part-time Panther, like I'll be a Panther on Tuesday and Thursday, I mean, and that's one of the things we tried to show in the film, that people had dedicated their lives, their lives. And so again, just to be around them and to meet them and to talk to them is a real gift of doing documentary films and doing a film like The Panthers.
And I think it also enables, it's great, as we were talking about with Eyes on the Prize too, in that extraordinary William O'Neill interview, the fact that we now have these interviews, which are not just about information, they're about understanding what someone looked like, how they sounded, where they're having a sense of their soul. And Shaka, that is what you were able to take from. Daniel Kaluuya's performance as Fred Hampton was extraordinary, and the way you can then show us in the film towards the end, it's so powerful when we see that archival footage. There's a question here which I just wondered if you will take a shot at. It's a question from Marta, who's interested in how did these young warriors come to consciousness so young? Either in your research, Shaka, around Judas and the Black Messiah, or just maybe in your own circle of artists and filmmakers. How do you think about the role of youth in movements such as this?
Well, I think it's probably a question, better directed to Ericka, having been a young person who made that choice. But, one thing that an observation I think I made, I don't know for sure, obviously, but it does feel as if so many movements, historically revolutionary movements, are led by young people. And it feels like that's for a number of reasons. I think one of them is they don't have the trappings of things. They don't have mortgage, property, job. They don't have these things that you accrue over the course of time, where you no longer want to sacrifice those things, those comforts that you've attained. Young people, I think, are a lot more like open and a lot more tapped in some ways to what's important. And I think also they're, and I mean this in the best way, impatient. I think one of the things that impresses me about, Gen Z is how impatient they are, how, intolerant they are in a lot of ways of bullshit, I feel like young people, the same way that, the expression kids say the darndest things, like they're truthful. And so I think the longer that you survive under, American apartheid and capitalism, I think the greater the propensity to exist within it as opposed to resist it. And so I do really think that that's some of the reasons why, you see young people leading social movements across the globe.
Shaka, thanks for that. You're right. I should ask Ericka, as a young warrior, did you notice a generational pull there? Were you doing things that people older than you were not doing? That's a ridiculous way of phrasing that question, but you know what I mean.
Yes, I do know what you mean. And I went to the March on Washington. I grew up in DC. So I went to the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. I was 15. I went by myself against my mother's wishes because she thought that possibly I could be harmed. But I reminded her that she told me that I had to stand up for our people. And I went there that day as I was there. I made a vow. It wasn't in my mind. It came from deep inside me to serve people for the rest of my life. And the tapestry of my life unfolded so that that is exactly what I did. Did I know that I would nearly lose my life and that my beloved John Huggins would be killed? I'd be separated from, no, I didn't know any of that. But I kept going. That commitment that Stanley talked about was real for me because I knew somebody had to step up. And I think all of us felt that way. I know that Fred felt that way. Whenever I hear him say, I don't think I'm going to die by slipping on a banana peel. It resonates. I understand it. And I also know that it is my duty to continue to support young change agents and revolutionaries and activists. It's my duty, not to sit back and say, look, they're not doing this and they're not doing that. That's not important. What's important is that they know that they are being supported. And that is exactly how I became friends with Alicia Garza and Patrisse Cullors. And because they were wanting to know, were you surveilled like this? Yes. Did they pit people together against one another like this? Yes. How did you rest? We didn't. How'd you take care of yourselves? We didn't. How'd you raise your children? We tried, and in many ways, we were not able to. But you can, because we learned through those experiences in hindsight how to do it. And so I wish that my generation, like a battalion of us, would support the younger ones in whatever it is that they want to do that is affirming of life, that is about transforming the ways in which we have been socialized to believe is a good life, and live a right life. And my daughter, who is that baby then, is one of those people. She does amazing things in a different way than I did when I was her age. I was younger than her. That's fine. My grandson, he's going to do it differently. But he asked me lots of questions about what I did. That's good. So I think that as we get older, not only do we get a bit set, but sometimes we get a bit too judgmental, especially if we look back and see something that we did. It's not that way. It is a continuum, as we've all agreed. It started centuries ago, and it will continue until it's changed.
Ericka, thank you for such extraordinary, just extraordinary wisdom born out of extraordinary experiences. Lumumba, I can see you, the way you are listening. Would you just
Thank you, just thank you, just thank you. You know, and I'm really reflecting on the role that I play. So when we talk about legacy, it's interesting because there's the legacy that comes from family and direct lineage. You know, the Panthers may not have been biological children of Malcolm, but in many ways they were the children of Malcolm. My parents were not Panthers, although my wife's father was, but we're children of Panthers. You know, we are that generation. So we actually are connected. I had the good fortune to play a role in facilitating a conversation between the current Black Lives Matter movement in California and Panther alumni in 2016 at the Panther reunion. And I tell you, I wish that could have been recorded and broadcasted. The connection was unbelievably powerful and amazing. And so I'm just thankful, Sister Ericka, that you share that, because we actually need elders who have walked the path that you walked to show that love and support to the people right now who are being incarcerated, who are being surveilled, whose families are being torn apart, who are undergoing psychological trauma that they were not prepared for. And so for them to connect with you all who have walked that path is significant. And so I'm just thankful that you shared that and said that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lumumba, thank you for that. And Shaka, I wanted to thank you for Judas and the Black Messiah. And I wanted to give the last word to Stanley, because, linked to this is one of the ways I came to know you apart from your work was actually the work of Firelight and you and Marcia. And there's been a lot of lovely comments in the chat about this sense of community from you on the panel. But Stanley and Firelight has built such an incredible community of emergent filmmakers, tend to be that, our younger filmmakers, and this sense of solidarity and being empowered to not simply to find their voice, but to use their voice. And I just wondered if you would leave us with some words as we bring this to a close, about anything you want, because you're Stanley Nelson.
You're talking about Firelight and Firelight Media, and we've been running the documentary for 11 years for filmmakers of color all over the country, and a number of other programs. And the filmmakers are really part of that new generation, and they're taking it, and we're kind of trying to give them that space to go. But it's like, it's like you're holding back, the reins of a bunch of horses, and you just let them go, and then they're running, and we're just so happy to be part of it, and hopefully it will continue, and filmmakers will continue. I want to again say, just thank you to everybody, Shaka, Lumumba, Ericka, as always, Tabitha, to you, but as Ericka was talking, I was just thinking what an honor it was to make the film, and it sounds corny, but it was just an honor to sit there with people like Ericka and people who gave their lives so that we could all be more free and do the things that we're doing. Certainly, I wouldn't be here without them. Shaka wouldn't be, making a film like that. None of us would be doing what we're doing. So I just want to say, thank you to the Panthers. And if you haven't seen Judas and the Black Messiah, you better, and if you haven't seen Vanguard of the Revolution, you probably should.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm going to tell you how you can do that. I'm also going to thank again Firelight Media and PBS Documentaries Prime Video channel, PBS and Independent Lens, for both supporting the work and allowing us to have this conversation. So Judas and the Black Messiah, which is an awesome film, is currently in theaters, and it's available to stream on HBO Max until Sunday, March the 14th. Also, if you're an Academy voter, you should vote for it because it's amazing. Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution is available to stream on PBS Documentaries Prime Video channel and PBS Passport. Watch them over and over again, talk about them, think about them. Remember that you just met Ericka and heard Lumumba and felt the work of Stanley and Shaka. And it's on all of us to ask what we can do in this continuing fight for justice and equality, and to bring a little more love. So happy Friday. Thanks to all of you. Enjoy the weekend.
Thank you,
Thank you
Tabitha.
so much. Nice meeting everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.